natural language processing and generative natural language processing models are sort of my bread and butter, my original impetus for getting into AI. So I'm always happy to talk about and see the new developments that are coming out. And obviously, recently, in the last 2 months, there have been actually, yeah, we're still less than 2 months. We've seen a pretty big leap in the form of ChatGPT and associated services. And what they're able to actually do. In essence, the Turing test died for all intents and purposes, and that is going to lead to some pretty rapid and in sort of social time by social time metrics, rapid cultural and economic and uh, other sorts of changes. Uh, but before we get into that, we'll just go over. Is anyone here? And please feel free to raise your hand in chat or whatever. Anyone here unclear fundamentally about what ChatGPT is, what large language models can do, or anything like that? I want to make sure everyone's on the same page before we get diving into this. All right. So, ChatGPT. Fair enough. Honestly, there are worse reasons. Many. So ChatGPT is a large language model trained using traditional training schema, but also reinforcement learning that is very, very adept at generating text when given a prompt. This can range from anything to short stories, to code snippets, to theoretical discussions of like its own future to instructions on how to lose weight. It truly is incredibly flexible. And for my money, I mostly use it for code and like sort of getting certain things set up that would be a pain in the butt otherwise, such as regular expressions and web scraping. Uh, and it's very, very competent at that. So these are things that you can say, respond to me like I'm looking to lose weight and you are a fitness coach, and give me some suggestions on first steps to take. And it will do exactly that in a way that 9 times out of 10 is difficult to distinguish from a person. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. Um, the data set it was trained on. So ChatGPT 3 and by extension 3.5, which is what we call ChatGPT, um, was trained on a trillion word corpus called I believe it was the Common Crawl data set, as well as extensive sections of Reddit, um, take that as you will, published literary works and other sorts of web text. So it's very, very. It just has it's just a lot of data. It's a sizable and like calculable fraction of the text that exists on the internet. So basically, these will very quickly start changing white collar jobs. They'll start altering how we interact with emails from people we don't recognize, things like that. And I wanted to get into that directly here with starting with a quote from, well, sort of a quote of asking ChatGPT what it itself thinks the impact of large language models will be. This was a prompt given by Lewis, and I just think it's a really good introduction. It sort of answers some of these questions. Also, guys, you are free. I mean, chat is totally fine. We can do this asynchronous, but if you raise your hand, I can bring you into the voice chat, so it's not just me speaking into the ether. But it's your choice. Um, yeah, well, buckle up. So, what are the societal impact of large language models like you? Large language models, like me, have the potential to greatly benefit society by improving natural language understanding and generation, which can be useful in a wide range of applications, such as language translation, text summarization, and question answering. However, there are also concerns about potential negative impacts, such as models including the possibility of biased decision making, the spread of information, the displacement of jobs that currently involve language related tasks. Additionally, there are ethical concerns about the use of large amounts of data to train models like mine, particularly with regards to issues such as privacy and consent. And that's actually something we're seeing in other generative training models or generative model training, like Stable Diffusion, where now they're being sued, which was very predictable, by people who didn't, they put their art online, but they didn't consent to have it train their replacement, essentially. Um, so as with many things, ChatGPT sort of hits it pretty squarely on the head. It's not the greatest response ever, but it's a good starting point, and that's sort of a lot of its power. It'll get you in the right direction a lot faster than Google or a book or most things. So, the first thing I wanted to discuss, the first sort of obvious thing I wanted to include, because I think it's important. If you guys are not aware of if you are only aware of one thing that this thing can do, and sort of go on and talk about with those in your life, hopefully it's this one, because this is going to start happening a lot. I have some background in cybersecurity, so um, that's sort of where my mind went. And the most obvious use of a model that can take as input a huge corpus of text and then as output sort of replicate the style in a convincing way is impersonation. So there's an attack that's conducted called a spear phishing attack, which is a phishing scam, which is just any sort of impersonation. A person says they are one person, like one person or organization, or represent one institution, but they actually represent another or don't represent anything at all. Um, and they use that to gain access to credentials. These are the sort of the scam call farms that tend to target elderly and less technically uh, competent individuals. Uh, and spear phishing is a variant on that, where you very specifically target one individual, or more accurately, you specifically target individuals, because with ChatGPT and other large language models, we could see a vast scaling up of spear phishing. People will be able to impersonate longtime friends. They'll be able to impersonate your boss, your mother, your brother, your aunt, all through sort of taking their social media or message histories or whatever information is available, feeding it to a model and having them impersonate the style, and then prompting it to say what you want it to say. So it's about to get a lot more difficult to tell what's real and what's not, and what has a person behind it and what doesn't. Uh, so I guess now I kind of want to start opening things to the floor and hear how you guys think. We're gonna take this slide by slide, but what are your guys' thoughts on the ability of essentially these models prevent you from, or could prevent you from, knowing if you're talking to a robot, and if they're decently cleverly designed, they could prevent you from being sure that you are talking to the person you know. So feel free to raise your hands and we'll get this conversation going. Well, the internet isn't ready for it, and that's why I'm happy to discuss it, because each of you will go forth and will be a little more aware. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, everyone's familiar with the Nigerian prince scam. It's an ancient scam, quite literally. And now you're not going to have to worry about it being, some Nigerian prince who's definitely totally going to pay you back the money, my dude. It's going to be your aunt you haven't talked to in a year, asking for a little bit of financial help, and it's going to be their email address, and it's going to be very, very clear. Or sorry, very, very convincing was the word I was looking for. So that's the sort of attack that I'm talking about here. Because the weakest, I think most cybersecurity professionals will tell you, the weakest link in most systems is the people. Does anyone have input they want? There should be a little hand raising button to request to speak. Yeah, should be enabled. Because I'm seeing a lot of people typing, and I'm happy to take this into the audio medium. Yeah, unfortunately, all technology ever created can be used for benefit, like good or bad, and it's not really um, the purview of the technology itself on how it gets used yet. But that's sort of why we need to be having these conversations, and it's why we need to be having them. Well, honestly, we needed to be having them 5 years ago, but now we're here, and now we have to be having them. No, just discussions on your thoughts, opinions, or what have you. I'm really just looking to get a dialogue going. There we go. Right to speak. There we go. Hello. You should be able to speak now. Um, you should. Are you connected to a mic or? No worries. Okay. Well, you get that. Let me know when you get that sorted out, and we'll keep soldiering on until then. Uh, yeah. One area that I'm really interested to see how they adapt is large enterprises, which are going to be particularly vulnerable to this sort of thing. I mean, spear phishing has been successful to various degrees against even people like tech CEOs and the sorts of people who you would expect to not fall for them can still be the target. They're, I would argue, the single most successful form of targeted attack, just because they are sort of a more classic social engineering scam. Yeah, basically. Loon, you can just be in the call if you want, and that'll let you chime in earlier. But it's your prerogative. And I am gonna move on, just sort of keep things moving. But if people want to circle back to stuff, that's all good. The next thing that we're gonna see, in the same way that that LLMs can write just regular old production code, they have already been used to write malware, which means that people can basically, with very limited knowledge of any sort of cybersecurity anything, write malware for stealing credentials or exploiting zero-day vulnerabilities that haven't been patched yet or anything. It becomes potentially trivial to create some decently sophisticated worms or viruses. And one popular technique and effective technique for sort of building code with ChatGPT is you build it in sections, so you just get it to do different functions. So someone with a moderate level of knowledge can make something truly devastating with really not much effort. They're I mean, they're not going to be the best thing in the world. It's more a question of How quickly can these be produced, and are enough of them getting through that it's a problem? There is also the sort of not contradictory, but the complementary aspect of it, where new detection can be potentially written more quickly using the same technology. The issue is that the detection software is innately more careful and deliberate and complex, so it might not be a symmetrical gain in uh, sort of output. I don't know. I mean, that's sort of a question, an open question, Delhi, in terms of how much of a problem do these become? My suspicion is that spear phishing and AI written malware will, for the most part, be something that really catches people off guard. There's going to be some really high profile leaks and breaches because of this. As a society, though, we will eventually adapt, and it's going to just become sort of a known thing, like on Tinder being catfished kind of thing. Like it can happen, but it's not going to be something that is constant, I believe, just because there are people who are working against it, and typically they're more good than bad aspect or actors, more good than bad actors. One sort of moving on quickly, though. Please feel free to keep the chat going, both either volunteering to speak or in the text. Um, is education reform. So one big shift that we're already seeing is education reform, with uh, universities just sort of immediately trying to get their hands on detection software, a bunch of people being caught cheating, and already we're seeing some courses in some universities start to shift away from essay based assignments, which I'm not sure if it's a good or a bad thing, but it's definitely going to be a thing. I know my sister is a high school teacher here in Canada, and she at that level is already. I mean, she's at a private school, but the way they do things there is very in class focused. There's not a ton of like homework written assignments, so she's not encountered it much. But I think we're going to see more education shift in that direction, and it kind of begs the question of what what skills are they going to start focusing on when AI can help you to a significant extent with things like coding and uh, and essays. I think there's still a lot, obviously, to learn about. It's just how quickly is that shift going to happen? I mean, coding is only just being taught now below the high school level, so MID is on the air, so to speak, or will be shortly. Hello. Hello? Are you MID? Are you able to speak? Okay. I mean, I don't know if it's gonna go quite that far, but it would be interesting to see if we can really upskill people, like the education that people receive using AI. That would be a very optimistic and wonderful thing. Sorry, MID, you're in.
Yeah, so as far as the educational, reform side goes, I was thinking a bit more positive impact of these language models. So, see, I'm from India, right? But like,
Hmm.
I have a relatively fine grasp on English, and that kind of makes my life a lot more easier when I
Hmm.
have to navigate stuff like those MIT's open lectures and stuff like that. So I
Yes.
always found that kind of stuff easy to navigate. But I also know a lot of people who weren't really able to use those resources properly because of the language barrier, and that's in my social circle. And like, So my mom is like a government teacher, and in India, government schools are bad. And when I
Mm,
mean bad, I mean really bad.
mm,
Okay, so I kind of used to visit those places, so I knew for certain that for those people, these resources might as well be written in an ancient language that they can't understand, right? So I kind of did a couple of tests. So used the OpenAI's Whisper to transcribe the uh, uh, lecture into English, then use the GPT-3 to do the translation. Turns out in Hindi it takes far too many characters to do the transformation, so it's
mm.
relatively expensive to do that. But still, it was able to do a quite good, uh, relatively good, translation into Hindi. I had to give it instructions like keep the mathematical terms still in English and stuff like that. But still,
Right,
it was able to do quite a good translation. And then I kind of used another source that is sort of popular because that teacher teaches in Hindi, but he also covers a very small number of topics. And then I sent that to ChatGPT and asked it to change the original text into this sort of speaking style. And even though
right,
the results were not really as good as I would have hoped, they were still like, a good proof of concept at that point that, okay, yeah, it can do some of this stuff relatively well. So I was, like it just made that possibility a lot more feasible that you can use of these resources that are available online and then, pass them through a language model, uh, do a little bit of prompt engineering, and maybe even if you use uh, a model which is more uh, trained towards like multilingual data sets, then even that might perform even better. But at
right.
the end, you get something that sort of closes that language barrier that sort of exists. So I thought like these language models might be like really good in this domain.
I completely agree. And like, I don't want to be Mr. Doom and Gloom here, because obviously, if I didn't believe this technology had capabilities for good, I wouldn't be here. But that's a really excellent point that business is conducted and a lot of education is very Western focused. English is the language of aviation and also of YouTube for the most part. So when we have sort of high fidelity um, uh, translations available automatically, that's going to open up a lot of education to a lot more people, which is obviously an excellent thing. Um, yeah, so like there are a lot of really beneficial ways that I think this is going to improve teaching, and even just like what is on the table right now. I have a friend who's learning how to code in Python. He's an accountant, and I was really hesitant to let him use or tell him about ChatGPT and encourage him to use it because you could use it as like a shortcut to never have to learn anything. But if you're deliberate in how you learn and you're intentional with how you use it, it can actually be a really amazing tutor because you can ask incredibly bespoke questions specific to your way of understanding and get answers that reflect that, which I think is going to be kind of a game changer for sort of personalized education.
Yeah, this sort of feels sort of really fascinates me because it the sheer impact that it can have is just mind blowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, but I also do get the other side of these language models. It's very easy to create high quality articles that are not accurate. So yeah.
Yeah. And we're actually going to get into some of that shortly. With regards to. Oh, hatred again. Oh, very nice. I'm gonna absolutely hit you up on that on a personal level because I do use this sort of thing pretty frequently in my work. Um, I saw a comment here, a centralized like a centralized place where people are talking document. Uh, the so fundamentally, anything that exists in information is something that AI can contribute to helping with or make worse, depending on who controls it. But in terms of specifically like cataloging it, honestly, your best bet would probably be something like papers with code, as that would contain a lot of the most relevant and focused on domains, but there isn't really like a central repository. It's more exists in communities like this and Lion and Eleuther, other places that and other places that sort of everyone's working on alignment, the process of making sure AI behaves the way we want it to behave and not just the way that it sort of does, in a way that is sort of provable and safe and secure. It's a pretty widespread topic, but yeah, I'm not sure of any central repository. So cultural impact is actually one of those things that I'm really hesitant to speculate on because it's such a, it's like asking about what's the large scale psychological impact of X, Y, and Z on every country on Earth. It's sort of incalculably difficult to parse, but hopefully as we go through this, we could collectively come up with some ideas of how things might change over the next 3 to 5 years and how sort of longer term this might shift society. So I do want to move on, or keep this moving, rather. Um, so that was education. Thank you so much, MID, for those points. I think that's a really great perspective. That as an English speaker in an English-speaking country, I wouldn't have latched onto immediately. So I very much appreciate that. Um, Sort of going back to my fascination with scams and deception and fraud, a thing that I studied explicitly in my undergrad. I think we're going to also see a lot of. I mean, we all saw what happened with. Well, maybe you weren't paying attention. Maybe you were spared this, but 3-ish. No, I don't know. Like last year, I guess was the when it was really big. NFTs. We all know them. Most of us hate them. They're terrible. But what NFTs really represent are a continuation of a very old scam called the Greater Fool scam, which is similar to pyramid schemes or multi-level marketing. The person who gets in early is the person who walks away rich. Everyone else walks away destitute. And the idea is that the scam can keep running as long as people keep paying in, because you can keep paying off uh, your previous investors. That's why it's called a greater fool scam, because everyone involved in it needs to find someone who's a greater fool than they are to buy in order to get their return. Uh, so I'm I am foreseeing that businesses that aren't valid, that are shams, are going to start popping up like weeds, and they're going to have a fabricated history. They're going to have a fabricated website, a fabricated product. Everything about them will look incredibly authentic. Everything will work. Everything will look professional, and they will evaporate the second they get their money and can run. So that's something that I'm expecting to see become more popular over the next little while. I'm sure that there are solid business practice and anti-fraud laws on the books already that prevent this sort of thing, but that only counts if you get caught. Yeah, that's another thing. I think you're right, Kareem. Like you really shouldn't be relying on lawmakers to protect you, because many in several countries have sort of abdicated that responsibility. Consumer protections are not what they were in, say, like the 70s in a lot of ways, although in some places they're better, such as not having to worry about asbestos in the ceiling anymore. Keynesian beauty contest. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I'm not familiar with any of those words, Candela. Basically, yeah. Actually, that's one of the conclusions I. So I'll get to Alexi, and then I'll get to you, dead Dr. Phil. I think that that's going to be. We might see another resurgence of blockchain itself. Actually, the fundamental technology as a way to authenticate information that exists solely on a digital medium. It might be a legitimate use case for once. But yeah, we're going to need some pretty aggressive checks for validity. In the same way that we have ad blockers now, it's going to be really difficult to get through the internet without them going forward. That's a prediction that I'm willing to make. Um, Tell me again if I missed it the first time. What kind of topics? So I'm discussing the societal impact of ChatGPT and other large language models. At the near the top of this chat, there are two PowerPoints. One is for the presentation I did last week, which covers the technical details more of NLP and large language models, and then above that is the slides for today, which I am uh, going off of, but people can follow along as they will. Uh, Oh yeah, no, exactly. Like, and that, but then you're gonna also see things like LLM generated fake traffic. You're gonna see astroturf movements where it looks like grassroots activism or grassroots attention, but it's actually entirely fabricated by incredibly convincing bots. So it's going to be pretty crazy. Uh, Yeah, we're already seeing just the tip of this, and we're gonna see it get a lot worse. I think it's gonna amplify a lot of the worst aspects of social media and internet culture. And I did come up with the worst sentence ever uttered in English language. I have a business idea. ChatGPT generated NFTs for Stable Diffusion artwork. Someone's gonna make it, and that person is going to hell. All right. Now we're on to sort of more the, I guess, big ticket items, things that I think are going to fundamentally shift culture and society, and it's sort of our job as people who are paying attention to this space or practicing or just involved in general to work to prevent this. But disinformation is about to become a lot more effective, I think. And we've already seen how effective it is. I mean, there's a 2016 election, sure, but even just passively, you see the sorts of control governments like Russia can exert or China can exert on their people. You see the types of infighting that can be sown with some like with the anti-vax stuff, where like it's going to get worse, but it's going to be more of the same, I think. And the passive form of this, I believe, will take the form of if you have an assistant that can answer, quote, accurately any question you have, you don't really need to search. You can get your news from it. You can get a lot of different things from it. But the biases in that model, either deliberately placed or accidental, will color your perspective of the world, your perception of what's going on around you. Just as Facebook created uh, echo chambers, these chatbots will do something similar, but it is even more insidious because yeah, you can always call out your aunt who posted some terrible fake study from 1999 about how vaccines cause autism, and you can, reply, "Hey, this isn't true. Here's why," and you can, ruin Thanksgiving dinner over it. But with a chatbot, it's it's convincing. It can cite its sources, even if those sources are terrible, and that is going to lead to this sort of, I think, fracturing of perceived reality, which is kind of scary. Yeah, the panopticon is real. Every tinfoil hat wearing person from the early oddies sort of hit it on the head a little bit. But the twist, the thing they didn't see coming, is that we did it to ourselves. Spooky. So beyond the passive form of just being further and further insulated from uh, the reality that others interact with, um, I think obviously there's tremendous potential for uh, convincing fake news generation, essentially, on a scale that is truly terrifying. I mean, for every a journalist could spend 3 days painstakingly researching a 500 to 1,000 word article about an event that happened last week and make sure every little detail is nailed down, everything is airtight. Or you could give 16 different prompts to ChatGPT and generate 16 different articles, all with different biases, emphasis, and even retellings of the events. And while you can't fabricate reality, very few people are going to be able to actually sift through that level, that amount of crap to find out what is and isn't true, and that's kind of horrifying. I think we're going to see this for the first time in a big way next year, um, because of how I'm actually probably going to start this year, but because of how American election cycles work, which is to say they never stop. The 2024 presidential election is going to be gearing up in the next few months, which is insane. I'll say as an outsider, that's crazy. Americans, why? But that means there's going to be higher stakes for information, for news, for political points, and that's when we're going to see these Cambridge analytical types, the people who were caught with their pants down stealing data and creating hyper targeted ads for the Trump campaign. We're going to see people like them, companies like them, starting to just push these tsunamis of fake news. But unlike prior fake news, it will be very convincing, even to discerning readers, which is it's going to be interesting. I I suppose, but I'm not talking fracturing reality. Uh, like we all have our own bubbles naturally. I do understand that. I mean, it's a lot of what I research as an undergrad. But these are we all have different. Well, we will all have different realities, and none of them will be based on actual reality. Not as much as they are right now, at least. Uh, I don't know if I believe I agree with that, Krim. I think elections are pretty complex things that you can't effectively distill into simple formulas. But certainly, fundamentally, it's a popularity contest. Any work you know of that partially? Yeah, I mean, I've actually palm fronds. I've actually made some of those. It was sort of that type of project is what got me into NLP in the first place all those years ago. Um, yeah, so I don't know anything that does all of that because I wanted to build it and no one did, and I didn't because life happens. But what you're describing is very similar to the project that I devised. It was called Echo Burst, bursting an echo chamber bubble, yada yada. But with what's capable now, I think that what you're describing is something that now or in the near future could be implemented with a very high degree of usefulness. So, like, one of the things that makes ChatGPT really interesting is that I've never in my life had the desire to have an Amazon Alexa or use Siri or any of that because they're like, I could push a few buttons and it would be faster kind of thing. Now we're getting assistants that tangibly actually contribute to what you're doing. And when you hit that sort of inflection point, well, then even people like myself who are very skeptical of including anything that's going to be actively recording me or in any other way invading my privacy, uh, we start to do the math of like how likely is it that this is actually going to be used against me in some way, and how useful is this going to be for me. Now, I still fall on the side of not using these assistants in ways that I try not to let them into my life, but in a constructive side of that is sort of what Pomfrond is getting into, where you could have a a bot that, well, it's still going to be biased because all bots are, everything is. Um, you could make it rigorous at least, so that even if it's still biased, you're getting a sort of higher grade of truth, higher citation, more citations, better quality of information than you would otherwise. I think that's a very laudable goal. Yeah, so Karim, we're already seeing that stuff. Like it was, I think last year, I don't know if it was Hungary or it was a Near East news outlet that showed a video of something or another, and the person in question claimed it was a deep fake. So it's gonna get really unsettling because it's not just text, obviously, that can be synthesized. Video, audio, all of it. You can make fully realistic. I would be shocked if in the next 2 years a fully realistic sort of demonstration of like probably Biden or some other powerful elected official saying, we're cutting off, we're no longer buying oil and gas or something silly, and it gets far enough, it does enough circles around the internet that it crashes the price of something that doesn't just immediately come back up. Okay, well, Pomfront, I think we're both definitely gonna want to touch base on this. Just you and I, or anyone else who's interested, because this is something that I've done a significant amount of research into, and having someone else who's interested in it is first of all heartening, and second of all, takes some of the burden off. So we should definitely touch base. What is your news source about attacks? For the for the LM large language model code, I think it was New York something. Let me just find it for you. Chat GPT malware. Oh, actually, sorry, no, it wasn't. Uh, it was a secondhand source from a security channel that I watch. Wait, no, that's Letitia malware. That's actually a very good program, just in general, but it is a secondhand source, so do keep that in mind. Um, Yeah, Karim. Honestly, Elon Musk would be the perfect target for a deep fake of this sort to just I mean, he's doing a bang up job himself, but to just crater SpaceX or poor choice of words, or Tesla or something, because he says so much outlandish, ridiculous stuff anyways. Trump is also a great candidate for the same reason, because need to be you don't need to avoid the AI, like the countermeasures, the AI software that says, no, this is a deepfake. You don't need to worry about any of that. All you need to do is get far enough that it starts spreading like wildfire. And by that time, the damage will be done by the time everyone realizes, oh, this was fake. Well, you don't need to be perfect, and you don't need to be even for some of these people, men. Let's be serious. Some of these men, they say so many ridiculous things already that you're sort of your window of like what they could possibly say is so large that it overlaps with what even present day technology can do. Like I am honestly shocked that no one has like created a deep fake of, or like an audio deep fake of Elon Musk saying some horrific, heinous thing and spreading it around. Um, I mean, he does enough of that stuff on his own, but still. Yeah, no, I think so. But then you have the other issue of like, what if you don't? What if you take all that time and energy, which will get less and less over time as it gets easier, and you focus that on a civilian, or God forbid, like a child or something. I mean, internet culture for middle schoolers is a piranha den. Like it's vicious sometimes. So I would be terrified of when I have children of the sorts of thing they might be subjected to. Um, and then you get into some really fucked up territory when you cross into like deep fakes for porn. So yeah, it and again, I'm really not trying to scaremonger with the new technology because for every virus, there's a vaccine eventually, and these are force multiplying technologies that will make finding those vaccines easier. But these are real things that are going to start happening, and no one is really talking about it in a significant way, and certainly no government on Earth is prepared for it. Yeah, actually, that's a really good point, Pomfront. For the first time in a while, it seems that there's a tangible, provable benefit to being a level-headed person who doesn't just spout random anti-Semitic bullshit or other races. You know how it is. You're all in the world. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And like it could it could derail your whole life. It could get you know, even if it was proved there was a deep fake, maybe a university's like, that's cool, but we don't really want to touch this trash fire, so we're gonna politely decline your admission, kind of thing. Um, Essentially, everyone's gonna get a chance to remake reality as they want, and then push it on other people, which isn't necessarily a power that every person should have. This has actually been a really great discussion on the disinformation, but I do want to move on to some of the more um, economic, I guess, focused aspects of it. And the main one, it's pretty straightforward, is the AI is not coming for the coder. It's not coming for the secretary. It's not coming for the paralegal. But it is going to make their job significantly easier. It's going to become a lot easier to do a lot more with a lot less. And when that's the case, well, you don't need an army of coders. Maybe you need a platoon. Maybe you don't need you know a entire staff of paralegals. Maybe you need five and a really good internet connection, and that's going to put a lot of downward pressure on wages, a downward pressure on um, negotiations and unions, and that's bad. That's a bad thing. It's going to lead to greater inequality. One sort of analogy that I really like is it's called the keys to power, and it's from a book called uh, crap. CGP Grey did a great video based off of it, but it's the Dictator's Handbook, I believe. And basically, the theory is that in order to keep in power, a dictator needs to have make happy and protect and ensure that they're on their side the keys to power, which are usually the military, the economy, and other such things. And as technology improves, you need fewer and fewer actual people to do that, to the point where in a more distant dystopian nightmare, you could theoretically keep an entire country running with a room of 30 individuals, all of whom are just like replaceable workers, basically. And all they're doing is monitoring stuff and making passing information on to uh, you, basically. It's a force multiplier, and it's going to be used in the way all other force multipliers have been, and that is to continue acquiring power, unless there's movement against that. Yeah, exactly. So, like Palm Franz, you're seeing it pretty clearly because I would bet a large amount of money that Trump and his team are already seeing it.
Hello there.
Hey, son.
I'm back again, back here once again, Tyler.
Yeah, happy to have you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about jobs and work and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just so everyone knows in the audience before I get started, hello. I am Loon. I hold a Master's of Science in Industrial Organization Psychology, and I work in the field of talent analytics.
Oh, so
Um,
this is really near and dear to your heart.
yes, exactly. This is why I was like, I'm going to tag in here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, here's the thing. Obviously, at, at the beginning, we're basically for now pretty much going to see, besides like scam businesses and startups and stuff like
Hmm.
that, you're basically initially going to see absolutely no change in the workforce
Yeah.
to
For
start
now.
for now. But like the now is not like a month or a year. It's like 5 years because most businesses still haven't even fully like embraced using like computers properly.
Yeah, I mean that's
Like
true. I mean, look at the
like
entire country
yeah,
of Japan. No
yeah,
offense to
no,
Japan, I love it, but
yeah, but
they
like
use fax machines, which is
but like
insane.
yeah, but even like data driven quote unquote companies and
Yeah.
like that are still very behind. We like to think it like a lot about Google and Amazon and Shopify and like really big companies with a lot of tech people that make a lot of moves. You know, there's a lot of like good cool things that are happening at like banks and things like that with a lot of money, but like this small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and even large businesses that are not particularly innovative are going to take a quite a long time to adjust. And even then, trusting a lot of the same trust things we were talking about before are going to impact are going to greatly impact the ability for these things to take hold in these industries.
So
Uh,
you're suggesting that the fact that we can't trust them because we can't
mhm.
will keep them out of. They'll
Any
stop them from cannibalizing everything. It'll slow them down at least.
Literally, some industries will be simply unable to even consider them.
Counterpoint.
Yeah.
What if they can trust them though? So like
Um, Medical services still are trying to learn to trust a computer, let alone an artificial intelligence.
true, and honestly, good.
I
Uh,
I yeah, I worked in a law firm at one point
mhm.
during grad school, and the amount of stuff they basically still did on paper was astronomical. And this was one of the largest law firms in the world. And their office is smack in the middle of Times Square in New York City.
Okay, so you're just fully putting them on blast here, are you?
Well, yeah, I don't
It's
know.
not that hard to narrow that down.
No, it's not. You can go find them. But like it's one of those things that I 100% think it will definitely affect work, but like I think it's going to affect things mostly in subtle ways. It's not going to necessarily replace jobs right away, but it's going to very much make it, like you said, with things like people being able to do some jobs more efficiently, it definitely will be. It's also
But is that
going
not
to
taking jobs? If you can do the same work as five people from 20
okay.
years ago.
Most companies have absolutely no idea how to properly manage, actually assess performance.
I mean, but they think they do.
Yeah, they think they do, but they think they do. So what you're gonna see is you're gonna see a lot of people trying to use, things like ChatGPT and stuff,
Hmm.
and large language models, maybe to try to get ahead against their colleagues and everything. But those language models aren't going to teach someone how to actually provide business value. It may make someone more efficient. It may make a smart person better at their job, but it's not necessarily going to greatly change the. It's not going to really greatly change like how many necessary people are working right away. However,
Right.
look at something like manufacturing. Manufacturing is probably one of the, especially things like large scale manufacturing, like auto manufacturing, are probably one of the best examples of automation taking jobs.
Yeah.
Like that is 100% something. So think of, so when we're thinking generally about the types of jobs that that something like ChatGPT is good at doing,
Hmm.
producing well written and somewhat credible text, uh,
Hmm.
somewhat credible text. What types of work, what types of work in the world exist that are basically that? I honestly think it's probably going to do more damage to something like journalism than it will do to like a programmer.
Right. And like that is like, so I can't speak with conviction about sort of the state of of a, of people with a certain skill set, except for
Mhm.
programmers and AI
Right.
researchers. AI researchers are sort of tautologically going to be the last job replaced, because if we
Of course.
weren't, then if AI was doing an AI researcher's job,
Then
that's
it's
called the singularity.
yeah, that's basically the end of the book I Robot,
Yeah.
where a bunch of AIs are running the world and just giving fake jobs to people to keep them happy.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which is a
yeah,
weird take, because I, for one, would not work if I wasn't getting paid, and I certainly wouldn't work if I didn't need to. But I would still
I,
do
I
things with my
I
life.
bet if I sat you in the woods with nothing to do for a month, you would probably start chopping wood.
Oh no, I no doubt. I mean,
Yeah.
I've gone on, like, more hardcore camping trips, and like a knife is not just a useful
Yeah,
implement; it's also
but what I
entertainment when you throw it into a
yeah, but
tree.
what I meant there is this people will still do things that occupy
Yeah. Oh
themselves.
no, no question. I'm just saying it won't be things that we think of
Yeah.
as. No one's going to be flipping burgers unless they're doing it like to make a
Yeah,
kick-ass burger.
that's 100. Yeah, that's 100% true. Like
There's
no
a
one
lot
will.
of bullshit jobs out there. Is my
Oh
point.
yes, 100% a
But
lot of bullshit jobs. But that's the thing about bullshit jobs is that there's a lot of right now bullshit jobs. A bunch of jobs and
yeah,
a bunch of people
absolutely.
that do work where the work itself isn't necessarily important. It's not
Yep.
building like just because ChatGPT, for example, is going to make writing marketing copy easier may not mean that the company needs to hire less marketers. It may just mean that the company just quadruples the amount of marketing they do, but they
Maybe.
still have the same amount of. They still need a manager to determine the framework of how they're going to do it. They need like 4 people doing prompts. They need someone monitoring the social media
But
platforms.
I
I'm
think
just
you're
saying.
still underestimating some of where these technologies will go in the near future. Because like
I,
there's
I'm not
some things.
underestimating the technology. I'm underestimating. I may be underestimating how well businesses are able to adapt to new technology.
I do get that, but here's sort of my counterpoint, if you will. What if, say, my accountant friend started using ChatGPT to do accounting
Yes.
things, and the things that
Mhm.
happen in the future, where it's going to be more reliable, and it's going to be able to take in bespoke data from your particular data sets. He doesn't tell
Yes.
his managers what he's doing. He just
Mhm.
suddenly becomes a quite a bit more productive than he was before, and uh, if he just was able to like be so much more efficient than he was before, then
Mhm.
either their backlog is going to start getting eaten up, which is great, and
Mhm.
then eventually once that happens, well, there's not a whole lot more work to do. Well, Carl over there, I mean, he hasn't really had a case in a while. We don't really, do we need Carl? I don't know. I don't think we need Carl. And then Carl gets let go, and my boy keeps plugging away, not telling anyone. I feel like unlike a lot of other productivity things, so like even the internet, Google, and all that stuff, all those they've required infrastructure.
Mhm.
ChatGPT can just like from source to vein improve your productivity, and the only thing you need is an internet connection and probably a subscription fee. And that
Right.
feels like it's more adaptable to the present infrastructure and ecosystem in many cases, not all. Like I fully admit that things like legal practices and medical, uh, sysadmin and all that stuff, there's a need for trust that you can't get with an AI. But
Of
there's a
course.
ton where you can.
Yes, I agree with that. And I'm not saying no jobs are going to go away. I'm not saying no jobs are going to go away. It's just one of those things that it's very easy to get. Like a lot of people are saying, things like, "Oh, the robots aren't going to take your jobs. The robots are taking your jobs," and it's kind of in the middle. Like, I think for the audience, like, think of, and if anyone's just put a question in the chat, I cannot see it because I'm walking around my apartment. Uh, but think of it a little more like the creation of like the steam engine than
Okay.
necessarily because like did that mean people stopped working? No, it just shifted greatly what work matters and what's possible.
It did actually remove a section of jobs that still hasn't recovered.
It did.
Horses.
Yeah. Horses.
There are
Yes,
far fewer horses in New York
I
City right
know.
now. It's a
I'm
pretty
I'm
famous
fully
thing from
aware
Bostrom.
I'm fully aware of the horse analogy.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I think here's my resistance to this perspective. It's
Mm,
not that I necessarily have a ton of faith in businesses to do the smart, profitable thing all the time
right.
because they won't.
Mhm.
But uh, I think it's better to press the panic button and start getting some people actually like moving on this, get people aware of this, get people to understand that their time is limited, in both the sense of their time being able to do the job as they do and their time on Earth, which maybe shouldn't be spent working if it doesn't have to be.
I
Um,
also 100% agree with that.
so
I
so
could
that's
not.
why in this arena, I'm very willing to push the panic button, basically,
Yeah.
because I think if you don't, and I don't mean panic in the literal sense, but if you don't take clear, decisive, and forceful action on this as a society,
Yes.
then either the people who really shouldn't will be the people in control, or at the very least, there's just going to be a bunch of like unemployed people and like no way to support them in a humane and like acceptable way. I mean, I think one sort of key thing that gets lost in modern society is this idea that when we were in prehistory, when we were,
Mhm.
agrarian and nomadic, there's this idea that, the strong survive, the strong eat the weak, the strong conquer those who cannot defend themselves. And
Yeah.
to an extent, obviously, that is true. I mean, just look at the
Oh.
Assyrians. But
Yeah.
the first evidence of healing from a critical, potentially life-ending injury goes back 200,000 years. There's proof of severe bone reknitting and healing, something that would have taken months to heal from and would have been a detriment for the rest of their life. There is substantial evidence that one of the ways that prehistorical societies survived was by taking care of their own. Those who could not hunt did other things. Those that could not do other things were taken care of because they had knowledge. And there's this modern perversion of that idea where it's like, well, if you can't hack it in the job, then you deserve to starve. And that's going to run up against the wall of, okay, but what if unemployment is 30%? Then what?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. The the thing here is less that I'm saying that like, oh, don't worry, everything's going to continue hunky dory. No, you could literally see even without AI or anything like that, that most professions and like most ways of, you know, we can clearly see with things like cost of living crises that it's becoming more and more untenable. Things that like
Yeah,
wages haven't
exactly.
gone up like in most countries,
Yeah.
in most countries, regardless, only certain professions, like the ones we all have, or are here aspiring to have, are basically the only ones with upward, with up, with upward like wage trajectories, basically. And
Yeah.
yes, I do 100% agree that ChatGPT is most likely going to make it so that some people that like the industries that start to adopt it are going to start trying to suppress wages because of it. Or what you're going to see is because you have things like the gig economy becoming much more popular. So this is the thing I will say is definitely going to happen because you already have because the reason why I'm saying a lot of like office jobs are probably going to be
Hmm.
less affected is because it's much harder. It's much harder. Yeah, it's much. Sorry, my girlfriend is speaking to me at the same time. Once. Mm-hmm. Okay. And anyway, so office jobs and a lot of like medical or legal or things like that are going to take a very long time to adjust because there's legal regulations, there's trust, there's things like that, and there's also a lot of professions that are very established. They've been very established for quite some time, and a lot of them haven't really changed that much, even with the convention of computers and internet. However, any job that has already been affected by like the gig economy and the reduction of security in work, such as writers and mm, things like writers and things like you know te- uh, like teachers, tutoring services,
Hmm.
people like basically anyone that you can think of where anyone that you can think of where finding a job and keeping it secure has become harder, it's only going to become astronomically harder when you can get a ghostwriter to do your work in 10 seconds with a computer.
And well, I
Uh,
mean, I don't disagree with that. I definitely think those in more vulnerable positions will be the first to go. But I don't think that counteracts my or
no,
contradicts my point that this needs
I've
to be
never said that.
something that, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But like this is something that like it's here now. I have my issues with him, but the fact that Andrew Yang brought UBI into like the public consciousness was a
Mm.
net good.
Yes.
And it needs to start actions need to start being taken because this idea that
Yeah.
the economy as it is as we know it right now is going to
Yeah.
persist is a
I,
fallacy.
yeah. I'm personally trying to stay like a little more like apolitical with this, only because this is a platform with a bunch of people and not just like a one-on-one conversation. But yeah, but yeah, I definitely agree that the economy will shift. Like within 5 years, I think what you'll definitely see is you'll see like half the economy basically doing the same kind of thing, where it's very slow move to things.
Hmm.
Like there's
Yeah,
going to be more adoption of things, obviously in bits and pieces, but not the kind of wholesale like upending. But then you'll have other parts that are like completely an upending.
yeah.
And I it is, yes, very hard to tell which parts are going that's going to exactly happen with. I just think it's I just think it's going to be less because I think in technology it's very easy to think of like the rational like best like optimal solution to something kind of
Yeah.
way of applying things. But businesses and organizations are far less rational, and especially the leaders who run them are
Yeah,
extremely irrational in their
completely
actions
agree.
and behaviors.
Yeah.
So you're going to see things where like some people try to apply things like, for example, in the field of recruiting, AI has already tried to make an entrance and then got really shot down. Like Amazon, for example, tried to use AI to help in its recruiting efforts, and it massively increased adverse impact and basically led to a lot of losses.
Hmm.
And yeah, and the thing is, that's also probably going to happen where things like ChatGPT and the usage of it are going to hit into labor laws. What you're going to see similar things of like people trying to outsource their programming work to like people trying to almost sublet their programming work to like an Indian developer, like
Hmm.
hire them for like for a fifth of their salary. Like you're gonna get people who are like, oh, you're using like businesses are like, oh, you're using this bot to do all your work for you. Like that's like they're not going to view it as like a good thing sometimes. Some of them
Yeah,
may view it as like a very negative thing of like we hired you for your skills and you're basically just slapping into this tool. It's going to be very case by case.
for sure. And like, I mean, I don't want to paint it as sort of a single stroke,
Yeah.
because um, there's obviously going to be different impacts in different industries. But
Mhm.
I think broadly for white collar workers, there's going to be this deflationary pressure from technology, because
Yeah.
it's not even just from ChatGPT. In fact, ChatGPT will be a footnote in 20 years time.
Oh yes.
But what about the things that come after? What about the things that can do what ChatGPT can't? What about the things that just do it better? They're not maybe going to happen. They're
Yeah.
definitely going to
It,
happen.
it's basically like one idea that I think may become something that where sometimes in some ways there could be businesses that come up which basically are selling expertise as like a product, like
Oh, yeah.
taking yeah, like for example my organization, if we trained a large language model to on our data and then had it be your assistant, it would basically it would replace actually like HR strategy, people who do HR strategy and like
Yeah.
quite high up people.
Hmm.
And it's going to, I think it may it really depends on how much individuals and people working in businesses who are not like leadership and not management realize how kind of replaceable a lot of pieces are,
I
because
mean,
leaders and managers may actually be more wary of these tools because like I just said, you could make a tool basically to replace strategists because it because if a large language model has all the data, you connect it to something like Wolfram Alpha, you connect it to a discrete database that has enough information to make decisions. It can basically it can basically synthesize the best possible decisions to make on any given topic.
yeah,
Like, what do you do with a consultant then? Like, what's the point of one? And
exactly.
yeah, yeah, I think it's going to be a very threatening technology, but the type of threat it's going to have is far less what you see in headlines of, oh, everyone's jobs are going to go away. I think it's going to more crack the economy as a another crack added onto the many other cracks that you just had from COVID, leading to increased remote work, leading to that showing how ridiculous a lot of the business structure and business culture and environment is. Then you're going to have things showing like, oh, we have technology that can basically just do a lot of our busy work almost completely for us. What's the point of it? And on and on and on. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's sort of my point because
Yeah.
uh, we're in an economy that can, to a sizable degree, let's even just call it 50%, can run itself. And that's kind of conservative, given the amount of our economy that already runs itself. What I'm not
Yes.
concerned about what do people do. That's their prerogative. But how do we ensure people can do it? How do we ensure that, you know, people aren't so nickel and dimed for every little thing that they buy or need, and people aren't, forced to pay an entire week's worth of wages, uh, or whatever substitutes wages when more people are unemployed, to get basic necessities, kind of thing. Like there's going to be a there's a chance here for a tremendous consolidation of power, and
Yeah, I
it's
agree with that.
important that that people are aware so they don't just let it happen.
The issue though with some consolidations of power, they're that great because see the difference is like when the steam engine got rid of horses, the horses didn't really have an opinion on the matter. However, one of the largest indicators of civil unrest is the percentage of population of unemployed young men.
Yeah, that tracks.
So so if you if you create a technology that makes 30% of the population unemployed, you won't have consolidated power for very long because most political revolutions do not happen when like 50% of the population is involved. They happen when like I think it's like 13% is.
1 in 7 is the number you're looking for.
Yeah.
Although,
It's yeah. It's
yeah, I mean,
really not a
Hong
lot of
Kong
people.
sort of like undermines that, but
Well,
you could
Hong Kong
argue that.
is
Yeah.
Hong Kong's a very weird case. Not get
Yeah,
into
I
that
mean,
either.
you could, yeah, but I completely agree. But I don't see it as an inevitability, and that's my concern.
Yeah,
I
I also don't also say there's no. It really depends. People like the reason why I'm more saying that like things are going to change slowly is because besides the the actual like legal barriers to some of those changes and like the industrial like barriers to those changes, it's also that people are very scared of these kind of complete shifts.
yeah,
Like
we'll see how well that fear holds them back.
that's true. It's also especially because we're also going to be at a point where I think a lot of people forget that the that the general population is going to decline in most countries except for ones currently in the on the hump, I guess, of the like social development cycle,
Yep,
basically. So countries like the United, like can't like our country Canada is the only is lower than replacement for its population growth, except for additional
immigration.
immigration.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So
immigration only lasts so long. Like there's eventually going to be a point where like is Nigeria going to be the only country that has like a more than 2.1 like
I
2.1 replacement
yeah,
rate? Probably.
I would not make predictions that far in advance
No,
if
but
you
like,
paid me.
but it's one of those things like there's a reason why this right now is an era like called like the Great Resignation, things like that. You have a lot of people leaving the workforce, and you're not having a lot of people filling those spots.
So you're arguing that one problem could potentially aid in the other, and I guess that makes
Yeah,
sense.
which
Yeah.
could either lead to the continuity of things right now, or lead to because it's a completely new generation, or like upheaval of it. A little hard to say which one's gonna happen.
Yeah. It's certainly an open question. Like there's no I don't know what the future holds, but I do think that if if there's one thing to take away from this section of it, it's that I hope LLMs will be a catalyst for change in a positive direction. Not in that I think the technology itself will make things better, although, as MID pointed out, ample opportunities for that to happen as well, but that an awareness of the ways it could be misused, the ways that it could be used to further disenfranchise people and remove control, as Pomfront is articulating, will spur them onto greater acts of collective action and
Mhm.
uh, sort
I
of group solidarity, so that we
yeah,
don't see this shift.
I'll generally say that I see the future of work as a very chaotic one. Um, in general, the trends you say tend to see in the talent space are a little it, there's been major shifts in the last few years, and more major shifts in the future are most likely going to come. Like, first we have remote work. Next, where people are highly debating 4-day work weeks.
Oh yeah,
Then
that's going to
there's going
happen.
most likely my field has been championing that for like 30 years,
Yeah,
like or more. It's been proven in research for longer than you could count. And now
it's
with more now that it's
yeah.
actually happening like within businesses, the case studies are only solidifying that case.
Yeah, I would wager that within 10 years, it's the standard.
Less.
Yeah,
The
I hope less, but I'm
yeah,
conservative when it comes to positive
I I I
improvements.
I think it's like actually it's going to be very similar with like large language models where everything in business happens it happens in different groups subgroups at a time.
True.
The younger the business, the more likely it is to adopt newer things.
Very true.
So if a business is more than 10 years old, expect it to take twice as long, if not 3 times or 4 times as long to make a change because the momentum and the infrastructure there doesn't usually allow for much.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like the person who's been at a company for 15 years isn't going to care much if you're trying to champion for a change in PTO policy, let alone changing the entire work structure. The
Yeah.
only reason why a lot of companies change remote work is because a pandemic would literally kill them if they didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
so it's we've been going almost an hour and a half now. So I do just
yep.
sort of want to wrap up, and I would encourage anyone else who's interested
Gonna
in
get
sort
off
of
the
raising
stage.
their hand too
Yeah.
to
I'm
join
gonna
this
get off the
discussion.
stage because
Oh
I
no,
gotta
no,
go to
you're,
dinner. So
yeah,
thank you very much, Tyler. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for letting me rant about work. So,
yeah, for
all
sure. Uh,
right.
so the last things I just wanted to cover, and it's not going to be a super involved one. The social, or sorry, the white collar thing took longer than I expected, but honestly, it's the one most near and dear to my heart, I suppose. But I did want to touch on a few more out there possibilities of what could happen, and this is actually getting a little more technical, strictly speaking. But I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on using large language models and other similar things to write code in an automatic fashion, write and implement code, or taking it a step further, using LLMs to sort of create, let's just call it the virus, because easiest way to think of it as a computer virus, but it can work in other contexts, web scrapers, spiders, etc. If you had a large language model sort of driving it as sort of the pilot of this vehicle, it could theoretically rewrite it each time to uh, get around various defenses or detection methods. And I'm thinking that we're going to see the start of a more Darwinian version um, of computer viruses and bots in general. Any sort of autonomous bot that isn't hosted in one location and it's passed from computer to computer. I think we're going to see things that can adapt and reproduce and survive autonomously, which is interesting and kind of concerning. LLMs in I don't know of anything that any uh, particular use of LLMs in engineering. However, I will say that I think we're going to get to a place pretty soon where we're going to see a link between 3D models and text in a way that is sort of suitable for CAD work and things like that. So work is our measure of our personal value at the moment. I don't think it should be like as sort of a fundamental human trait. It is right now, but I think that's not actually something I'm too worried about. It's more an obstacle to sort of convince people to reject because there are lots of other ways you can get value. I mean, if you look at sort of the percentage of artists and creatives and people who really sort of go out and do their life's passion that are from very wealthy families, it's a very high percentage. And if everyone had the opportunity to explore the things they wanted to, I think people would find different ways to define themselves outside of work. See, I think you're absolutely right that there needs to be a cultural shift before people are, broadly speaking, more able to sort of accept that and champion that perspective of wanting to define yourself as who you are as a person and the things you value more than the job you do. If there are no particular thoughts on the sort of genesis of uh, autonomous life, essentially, um,
Yeah, so regarding the
oh yeah,
virus code that you talked about, right? My question was, why does that require an actual LLM to work? For example, pattern recognition is basically the core concept of AI, right? So
yep,
even though like LLM might provide you with a little bit more flexibility that it can actually write the code to make the changes, right? On the other hand, it works, it's always possible to maybe write a bot with multiple options, and then depending upon how the website reacts to that particular bot, the configurations and or the parameters of that bot might change, so as to see if that kind of stuff works. So that technology was always sort of present in uh, this domains, but as far as I'm aware, there hasn't really been much impact of that. So, what do you think is like the core factor that LLM might bring into the case that might, jump up its the progress of such a nefarious use case
yeah.
out there?
Well, the main thing would be like so different options depending on how the website reacts. That's well and good, but as I think we've all seen, for example, captchas have changed and gotten a lot more difficult over the last 10 years. If you had a bot that could adapt to that sort of on the fly, and not all of its changes would be successful, but maybe some of them would be, and those would be sort of the successes of that generation. You could have a bot that is in some ways, ironically, despite the fact that robustness and AI don't usually go hand in hand, you could have a more robust web scraper or computer virus or piece of malware or keylogger or what have you, because it can not only adapt to the changes that you know are coming or the different configurations you might need to get around, they could adapt to changes that are made after you've released it that you could have never seen coming. And
Yeah.
this is further out there for a reason because like we're not there with the technology yet. It's just sort of writing that I've seen on the wall, so to speak.
Yeah. So the point here is right the fact that for example captcha, right, like you have ImageNet models that can basically do a good amount of classification, right? It beat the human recognition score quite a while back, I believe, right?
Yep.
So like even yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like I think it was like 2018 that it
Uh,
beat the human level.
yeah, yeah. So like you have like at least the industry had a quite a lot of time to use those AI models to at least see if you could basically integrate them into bots to see if they kind of break the internet. But I think the more impact of bots come from the fact that you can have a lot of them, but with less computation. LLMs and these AI models, like the core crux is that these are very sort of heavy models, and
Hmm.
just doing inference sort of takes resources. And if you went for a more brute force approach, where you like just tried as many things as you can and some things slip through the cracks, uh, so playing a brute force approach rather than playing smart seems to be the approach of bots these days, and doesn't like even language models can't really compete with the fact that it's just easier for uh, bots to have different configurations, and just having a lot of bots that just work, and some of them might pass through, rather than having a LLM basically modify a bot to pass through each uh, uh, captcha or each sort of restriction that you have.
I think that's a really good point, and I certainly don't think this is going to become like the standard MO for viruses or scripts or anything. But think about something like Stuxnet, which was a computer worm devised by Redacted. We technically don't know who. We think it was probably Israel and the U.S. But it was launched to attack Iranian uranium centrifuges, and it did that by basically preventing like it made the things that were monitoring the centrifuges um, think that they were performing within parameters when they're actually rotating far faster than they should, so they would destroy themselves. Now, in most cases, you definitely want lots of options. You sort of shotgun it, and what works will work. For something like Stuxnet, where it's millions of lines of code, very heavy, and it's state backed, so you need it to work as best as it possibly can. If you had a small enough LLM that it could be a part of this package, and like I said, we're not there technologically yet, but if you did, you could have something that each time the Iranian nuclear facility changed something about their protocols, changed something about their malware detection and their security, it could realize that it's no longer being able to do what it's supposed to and rewrite itself to try to be able to do that thing. So it's not necessarily that I think this is going to become like the dominant strategy. It's just I think this will be an effective strategy in some cases, and it will create things that resemble life to a far greater degree than what we've seen in the past, because it'll be able to reproduce and it'll be able to adapt, and at that point you no longer need a person to keep it going necessarily. And it's more of just a thought experiment of like, what are your thoughts on this being a thing that could eventually happen? Because I think you're right, and it's sort of a point that I hadn't considered, that even with how easy it is to write things with ChatGPT, fully integrating it is a whole other thing, and just not going to be something that every Dick, Tom, and Harry is going to be able to write up.
Yeah, no, your point sort of makes a lot of sense. I did not consider the fact that, yeah, these bots, like you can have very specialized attacks for very specialized and like high, cases where compute doesn't really matter as long as the attack is successful.
Yeah,
And yeah, actually, in those cases, these LLMs sure sounds quite scary, I would say. Indeed, yep.
yeah, it's gonna be a very interesting time to be alive, to be sure, for better or for worse. I never quite understood the old proverb, or old curse, I should say, may you live in interesting times, but I do now. I have for a while, but yeah. Um, will be quite so significant. LLMs haven't changed my life too much so far. Better at writing, but so like I don't know if I agree Alex, because it ChatGPT is the most sudden sort of demonstration of that. But that's just looking at this one sliver of time, these 2 months. If you look at it, 5 years back, models 5 years ago had nothing on models today. The rate of progress is kind of exponential. Like it does keep building on itself as sort of hesitant as I personally have been to uh, believe that would be the case, that you could just keep making things bigger and they would just keep getting better and they would do so at an exponential rate. But we might not see the change now, and we might not see the change tomorrow. We might not see the change in a year, but 3 years from now, things might look noticeably different. Which, in terms of like human history, I mean, generations pass between significant events, kind of thing. Generations, whole dynasties rose and fell without a significant change in technology or capability of the individuals inhabiting it. And now we're looking at things from 5 years ago, saying, "Man, that was pretty basic compared to what we have now." But we haven't. I mean, we still haven't adapted to social media. We've barely adapted to the internet as a society. Right? We still don't know how to handle the deluge of fake news that social media provides. I hope you're right. I would love for us to be able to adapt faster than the technology, but so far we've utterly failed. Just for context, that was the end of the slide. I do have a discussion page, but we've been discussing the whole time now. Um, I do want to ask people if they have a topic they want to present on, because I would really like to not be the one doing this every time. Not because I don't enjoy it, but I am an incredibly introverted person. I don't love being the center of attention uh, this often. So if other people have a paper they'd like to read or to present on, uh, please do let us know soon, preferably, so we can get it all set up for you and make sure everything is good to go. Um, I don't feel I have, but I appreciate you saying. Actually, Alex, you're the one I should be haranguing for this, since it's you and me here, bud. But really, I mean, I said it in the first presentation that I really like this stuff. I definitely have Asperger's, and it shows when I talk about things that I'm very passionate about and very interested in and very knowledgeable about. You really, really don't need to be as much of a tryhard as I am. Like when I made the presentation last week, it took an hour to present, probably between the questions, and I probably spent like 10 hours making the thing with ChatGPT's help. You don't need to do that. It's really okay to just come up here and have an idea and talk about the paper, and we all have a good talk about it. Please, I'm begging someone. Alex, if no one volunteers, I'm coming for you. You know that, right? That makes it sound like a death threat. I just mean I'm going to harass you into figuring out something. No. Palm Franz, you don't need to have written the paper. It's really, you just find a paper you want to present on or talk about. Okay, see, that's a start. Yeah, maybe I would recommend, Alex, doing that like as soon as possible in the reading group text channel, or maybe even reading group text channel is probably best, and tagging people, because one of the reasons why I'm here today, basically talking about this, an extended version of my last presentation, is because we couldn't find anyone, and by that time it was too late. So we want to try to get people slotted in early, so everyone has a good idea of what's coming. So that's sort of the end of things where I make words. Um, Does anyone else have anything they want to say? Hop on, have a chat. If not, then thank you all for coming here. There have been a lot of sort of people passing through, but you're all here now, and I really appreciate that. I hope you've learned something or sort of had some possibilities opened to you. And I'm free in you can always DM me or at me in the channel if you want to talk about some of these things more specifically or in depth. But for now, I think I'm going to stop the recording.